The violet-blue glow washed over every corner of the Obsidian, the most exclusive club in Chicago. Cassandra Mitchell kept a steady balance on a silver tray in her left hand, while her right reached for a bottle of red wine. Her fitted black uniform was still neat even after a long shift, but her green eyes gave away the exhaustion of someone working her third job of the week. She had been a server here for exactly 4 days. The pay was decent, the tips were generous, and she needed every single dollar. The hospital bills from her mother's chemotherapy last year had buried her under a weight of debt so deep she could barely breathe. Then her mother died. Then the funeral. Then she borrowed money from Tony Moretti to cover it all. Now he was demanding repayment in a different way. 5 days until the deadline. 5 days until she lost everything. Or worse. But right now, none of that mattered. Right now, she only had to get this tray of wine to the VIP section without spilling a drop. The club was packed, like every Friday night. Powerful businessmen in expensive suits, couples drinking by candlelight, groups of men with the kind of dangerous eyes Cassie knew better than to meet for too long. Smooth jazz threaded through the air, mingling with laughter, conversation, and the clink of glass against glass. Cassie moved toward the VIP area with the practiced ease of someone who had learned to stay calm under pressure. She set the wine glasses down, then dipped her head politely. "Chateau Margaux, for you this evening." A small, trembling voice broke through the ambient noise. "Mama." The word was soft as breath, almost a whisper. Yet it sliced straight through the music, the laughter, every sound around her, like a knife through butter. Cassie went perfectly still. Her hand trembled, and the tray made a faint, nervous rattle. That voice, that small, hesitant voice. Where was it coming from? Somewhere just behind her. "Mama." This time it was louder, clearer, certain. Cassie turned slowly, careful not to drop the tray. Her gaze landed on a little girl standing in the aisle. The child looked about 5 years old. Long black hair fell over her shoulders. Wide ocean blue eyes stared straight at Cassie. She wore a pure white dress, like an angel that had wandered into the wrong kind of darkness. The girl lifted her hand and pointed, that tiny finger aimed straight at Cassie's heart. "Mama." This time, her voice carried absolute certainty. The entire club fell into silence. The jazz seemed to die mid-note. Conversations stopped in place. Wine glasses froze in midair. The most dangerous men in Chicago turned to look, as if the universe itself had pressed pause. And just behind the little girl, a man shot to his feet. Tall, dark-haired, steel-gray eyes, a faint scar cutting through his left eyebrow, a perfectly tailored black suit that could not hide the danger in the sharp lines of his face. Marcus Salvatore, the man at the top of Chicago's underworld, and the little girl who had just called Cassie Mama was his daughter, Grace Salvatore. She had not spoken a single word since the night she watched her mother get shot to death right in front of her. 4 years. 4 years of absolute silence. Not one specialist, not one doctor, not anyone had been able to make her speak. Until this moment. Until she looked at Cassie. If this story touched your heart, please tap like to support the channel. Share this video with anyone who loves emotional stories. And do not forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you will not miss the next episodes. Marcus Salvatore moved toward Cassie with heavy, decisive steps. Each one carried the full weight of the suffocating air now pressing down on the club. The bodyguards around him shifted at once, forming an invisible ring. Cassie felt her heart slam and stumble in her chest, her feet suddenly nailed to the floor. She wanted to run, she wanted to vanish, but her body would not obey. Then he was right in front of her. He stood nearly a head taller. Those cold gray eyes cut straight through her, as if he were taking her apart, thought by thought, piece by piece. "Who are you?" Marcus's voice was low and icy, not a question so much as a command that demanded an answer immediately. Cassie forced herself to swallow. "I am Cassandra Mitchell, sir. I am just a server here. Where did you meet my daughter?" "I do not know." Cassie shook her head. Her voice trembled, but she fought to keep it steady. "I swear I have never met her before. I have only worked here for 4 days. I do not understand why she is calling me that." Marcus narrowed his eyes, the suspicion in him not easing at all. All around them, the entire club remained locked in tense silence. No one dared to move. No one dared to breathe too loudly. This was Marcus Salvatore's territory, and everyone knew what happened to people who tried to play games with a man like him. Right then, Grace stepped forward and clung to Cassie's leg. Small hands wrapped around her as if she were afraid Cassie might disappear. "Mama, stay." The little girl's voice was soft, but it carried pleading in every syllable. "Do not go." Marcus looked down at his daughter, and for the first time Cassie saw the coldness on his face crack. What showed through was the gaze of a father who had waited too long, who had lived too long in desperation, and who was now watching the impossible happen. His daughter was speaking. After 4 years, she was speaking. A man in thin-rimmed glasses approached Marcus and leaned in to whisper something. Cassie recognized him. Jimmy, Marcus's right hand, the one her coworkers mentioned with fear in their voices. Jimmy pulled out his phone, his finger moving fast across the screen. Then he murmured a few more words close to Marcus's ear. She is clean. Jimmy said it loud enough for Cassie to hear. Cassandra Mitchell, 27. Her mother died 14 months ago from cancer. She is in major debt, working 3 jobs. No connection to any families in the life. No criminal record. Nothing suspicious. She is just an ordinary girl trying to survive. Marcus said nothing for a long moment, his gaze still fixed on Cassie. She felt like she was being examined under glass, every smallest detail measured and judged. Then he looked down at Grace, still clinging to Cassie as if Cassie were the only life raft left in open water. "What time do you get off?" Marcus asked. His voice was still cold, but the sharp edge had dulled. 11, sir," Cassie answered, not understanding why her heart was still racing like this. "After your shift, you will come to VIP room 3. I need to talk to you." It was not a suggestion. Cassie understood that. In Marcus Salvatore's world, there was no refusing. She nodded, not knowing what else to do. Marcus dropped to one knee, level with his daughter, and his voice softened in a way that felt almost unnatural. "Grace, you have to let her work. You will see her again later. All right." Grace looked at her father, then looked at Cassie, her expression tight with worry. "She will come back," Marcus promised. "Daddy promises." Reluctantly, she let go. But those ocean blue eyes stayed on Cassie as Cassie backed away. Victor, a large man with a blank face, stepped forward and lifted Grace into his arms. The little girl did not resist, but her gaze never left Cassie, not for a single second. Cassie returned to work with hands that still shook. She could feel everyone's eyes on her, and the whispers began to spread through the club like smoke finding air. She did not know what she had just stepped into. She only knew that her life, already chaotic enough, was now sliding into a darkness she could not control. And somewhere in her chest, alongside the fear, something else began to stir. The feeling of those small hands gripping her. The feeling of that clear, fragile voice calling her, "Mama." The feeling that she had just found something she never knew she was searching for. The clock read 11:15 when Cassie stopped in front of the door to VIP room 3. She had changed out of her uniform, pulling on an old gray sweater and faded jeans. Her hand tightened, then loosened again. Her stomach knotted with worry. She did not know what was waiting on the other side of this door. She drew in a deep breath and knocked. "Come in," Marcus's voice carried from inside. Cassie pushed the door open and stepped in. The room was lit by soft golden light, nothing like the loud chaos outside. Marcus sat on a black leather sofa, a glass of whiskey in his hand, his gaze turned inward, fixed on something only he could see. On the table in front of him lay a small photograph. Cassie could not make it out clearly, but she guessed it was someone important. "Sit." Marcus motioned to the chair across from him. Cassie sat obediently, hands on her thighs, trying to keep herself from shaking. Marcus was silent for a long time, as if he were arranging his thoughts into an order he could bear. Then he picked up the photograph, set it down again, and turned it toward Cassie. "This is Victoria, my wife." Cassie looked at the picture. A beautiful woman with long black hair and ocean blue eyes, the same eyes as Grace. "She died 4 years ago." Marcus went on, his voice low and rough. "Shot to death right in front of Grace." Cassie felt her heart constrict. She wanted to say something, anything, but her throat tightened shut. All she could do was sit there and listen. That day was Grace's birthday. Marcus's eyes sank into a memory that still bled. Victoria took her to buy a cake. "I should have gone with them, but I had something I had to handle. I thought it would be quick. I thought there was nothing to worry about." He stopped. His hand clenched around the whiskey glass until his knuckles turned white. "Frank DeLuca, an enemy of my family, set an ambush. They blocked Victoria's car in the middle of the road. She pulled Grace into her arms and used her own body to shield her. 3 shots. All 3 hit Victoria. Grace was trapped inside that car for 3 hours before my men found them. She sat there holding her mother's body. She did not cry. She did not scream. She was just silent. And after that, she never spoke another word." Cassie felt tears rise and spill over. She could not imagine that kind of pain. A child, only 1 year old but already beginning to form her first words. Witnessing her mother die in her arms. "I have tried everything," Marcus continued, And for the first time, Cassie heard something in his voice she never expected to hear from a man like him. Desperation. The best psychologists in America. The top therapists in Europe. Experimental methods that cost millions of dollars. Nothing. No one. Nothing could make Grace speak. It is like she is locked inside her own world, and I cannot find the key. He looked straight into Cassie's eyes. Until tonight. Until she saw you. Cassie shook her head, still not understanding. I truly do not know why. I am just an ordinary server. There is nothing special about me. Have you lost someone? Marcus asked suddenly. Someone important. Cassie hesitated, then nodded. My mother. 14 months ago. Late-stage cancer. I took care of her for 2 years, watching her fade a little more every day. At the end, she held my hand and said she was sorry she had to leave, that she wished she could stay longer to see me happy. Cassie's voice caught. I promised her I would be all right. But honestly, I have never been all right. I am only trying to survive. One day at a time. Marcus looked at her, and for the first time Cassie saw something warmer flicker inside those cold gray eyes. Maybe it was empathy. Maybe it was the quiet understanding of people who have already lost what mattered most. You should know something, Marcus said. Grace has been standing at the club window for the past 4 days. Every morning and every night, she has pulled my hand and brought me here. She stands there and looks inside for hours. I thought she just liked the lights, liked watching people come and go. But now I understand. She has been looking for you. Somehow, she knew you were here before she ever met you. Cassie shivered. This was beyond anything she understood. She did not believe in fate or destiny, but what was happening could not be explained by logic. Maybe Grace saw something in her that Cassie could not see in herself. Maybe grief had woven an invisible thread between them. Maybe, just maybe, the child needed someone who understood what it meant to lose a mother. Marcus set the whiskey glass down on the table. His gray eyes locked on Cassie with a gravity she had never seen in anyone before. I have an offer for you. He spoke slowly, each word chosen with care. I want to hire you to take care of Grace. Full-time. You would live in my estate and stay with her every day. Cassie blinked, not sure she had heard him correctly. Hire her. Live in his house. Care for the daughter of a Mafia boss. Before Cassie could even open her mouth, Marcus continued. I will pay you $20,000 a month. He said it as if he were talking about the weather. On top of that, I will pay off all of your debt, including what you owe Tony Moretti. You will have your own room, your own car, everything you need. And if you want to keep studying, I will pay your tuition. Cassie sat there with her mouth slightly open. The amount he had just named was more than everything she made in an entire year working 3 jobs put together. It could erase every problem she had. The debt, the rent, Tony Moretti, all of it. But Cassie was not foolish. She knew there was no such thing as a free lunch, especially in the world of men like Marcus Salvatore. No, Cassie shook her head, her voice trembling but firm. I cannot. Marcus raised an eyebrow. He was clearly not used to being refused. You are drowning in debt. You are about to be thrown out of your home. And there is a loan shark threatening you. Why would you say no? Because of who you are. Cassie held his gaze, forcing herself not to let fear swallow her whole. I know what kind of man you are, Mr. Salvatore. I hear what people whisper in this club. You run the Chicago underworld. They say you are more dangerous than anyone in this city. I do not want to be tangled up in your world. I do not want to become part of what you do. Marcus did not get angry the way Cassie expected. Instead, he looked at her with something that resembled respect. You are brave. Not many people would say that to my face. I am only telling the truth, Cassie answered. I do not want your money. I do not want to be pulled into the trouble your life brings. I just want to live quietly, even if that quiet life is hard. Marcus fell silent for a long moment. Then he did something that took all the air out of Cassie's lungs. He stood, stepped in front of her, and went down onto one knee. The most powerful Mafia boss in Chicago was kneeling in front of a broke waitress. Cassie froze. She could not believe what she was seeing. Miss Mitchell, Marcus said, and his voice was no longer cold. It carried the raw edge of pleading. I am not buying you. I am begging you to save my daughter. For 4 years I have watched Grace sink into darkness. I have tried everything. I have spent millions of dollars. I have brought in the best specialists in the world. No one could do it. No one could reach her. And then you appeared, a complete stranger. And in a few seconds you did what the world could not do in 4 years. You made my daughter speak. He looked up. His gray eyes were no longer steel. They shimmered with something dangerously close to tears. I am her father. A father who failed to protect his wife, who failed to heal his daughter. I can buy this city, but I cannot buy back what Grace has lost. And now you are the only light I have left. I am begging you, not as a boss, as a desperate father." Cassie felt her eyes burn. She looked at the man kneeling in front of her and saw real desperation in every line on his brow, in the way his voice shook when he said his daughter's name. This was not a power play. This was not an underworld trick. This was a father pleading for help for his child. "I need time to think," Cassie whispered. "Can you give me one night?" Marcus nodded and rose to his feet. "Think. I will have Victor take you home tonight. And Miss Mitchell, whatever you decide, I will handle Tony Moretti for you. That is not a condition. That is because no one deserves to be treated the way he has treated you." Cassie left the club with her mind in chaos. She did not know what to do. Her reason told her to run as far as she could from Marcus Salvatore and his dangerous world, but her heart remembered small fingers clinging to her, a clear young voice calling her, "Mama," and she knew that no matter what she chose, her life would never be the same again. Victor dropped Cassie off at her apartment on the south side just before midnight. He offered to escort her to her door, but Cassie, still overwhelmed and needing a moment of solitude, insisted she would be fine on her own. She thanked him, then climbed the dark stairwell, each step creaking under her shoes as if the building itself were complaining about its own decay. Her unit was on the 3rd floor, a cramped little room with damp stains blooming across the walls, and a window that never shut all the way. It was the only place she could afford, and even so, she was 2 months behind on rent. Cassie unlocked the door, stepped inside, switched on the light, and felt her stomach fall. Tony Moretti was sitting on her sagging old sofa, his feet up on the table, a cigar clenched between his teeth. 2 of his men stood on either side of him, arms folded, watching her with hungry eyes. "Hello, sweetheart," Tony grinned, the kind of grin that made Cassie want to throw up. "Working late. How did you get in here?" Cassie asked, her voice shaking as her back pressed against the door. Tony stood and walked toward her in slow, unhurried steps. He was a middle-aged man with a swollen belly and a face marked by scars. But the worst part was his eyes, the eyes of someone who did not value human life. "Sweetheart, there is no door that can keep Tony Moretti out." He stopped right in front of her, so close she could smell the thick stench of cigar smoke and liquor on his breath. "Especially when somebody owes me money and thinks she can hide." "I am not hiding." Cassie tried to keep her voice steady, though her whole body was shaking like a leaf. "I am trying to earn the money to pay you. There are still 5 days. Tony threw his head back and laughed, the sound echoing around her tiny room. 5 days. He repeated. "Sweetheart, 5 days is not enough for you to come up with that kind of money. I have already given you too much time. Now I am changing the terms." He lifted a hand. His rough fingers slid along Cassie's cheek. She flinched and tried to pull away, but her spine was pinned to the door, nowhere left to go. "You have 48 hours, Tony said, his voice dropping into a hiss. "Not to pay me in cash, to pay another way." His eyes traveled from her face down her body, as if he were stripping her bare. "A pretty thing like you. I have plenty of ways for you to work for me. My customers are going to love you." "No," Cassie screamed, shoving Tony back with all her strength. "I would rather die." Tony did not get angry. He only smiled, a smile so cold it sank into bone. "D." He nodded to his men. One of them stepped forward, grabbed Cassie by the hair, and yanked her head back hard. She cried out in pain. "I do not like killing people, sweetheart," Tony said, pressing his face close to hers. "But I can make you wish you were dead. 48 hours. If you do not come to me on your own, I will send someone to pick you up. And trust me, sweetheart, you are not going to like the way they pick you up." He motioned, and the man released Cassie. She collapsed onto the floor, her hair a mess, tears streaming down her cheeks. Tony and his 2 men walked out, and his laughter followed them into the dark hallway. 48 hours, sweetheart. Do not disappoint me." Cassie lay on the freezing floor, trembling. She wrapped her arms around her knees and sobbed until her chest hurt. There was nowhere left to go. No one could help her. The police would not touch Tony Moretti, not when he had ties to powerful people. Her family was gone. Her friends were as poor as she was, or they had drifted away a long time ago. She was completely alone, and then she remembered the business card. Marcus had handed it to her before she left the club, telling her to call if she needed anything. She dug into the pocket of her coat and found the black card with silver lettering. Just a phone number. No name. Nothing else. Was this the right decision? She would be stepping into Marcus Salvatore's world, the very world she had said she wanted no part of. But what choice did she have? With shaking hands, Cassie dialed the number and lifted the phone to her ear. Marcus answered on the second ring. "Miss Mitchell." His voice was alert, even though it was well past midnight. "What happened?" Tony Moretti, Cassie whispered, her words breaking. He was just here. He gave me 48 hours to... She could not finish. The tears came again. There was silence on the line for a single beat. Then Marcus spoke, his voice like ice. Victor will be there in 20 minutes. Pack what you need. From now on, you are with me, and Tony Moretti will never lay a hand on you again. Cassie ended the call, and for the first time all night, she felt like she could breathe. She did not know what she was walking into, but she knew that with Marcus Salvatore, at least she would be safer than she was alone in this place. The first days at the Salvatore estate passed like a strange dream Cassie could not quite believe was real. She woke in a room 3 times larger than her old apartment. A bed with a soft mattress, velvet curtains, a window that looked out over the wide garden behind the mansion. Each morning, Mrs. Webb brought breakfast to her room, a routine Cassie needed several days to get used to. She was not used to being served. She was the one who served other people, not the other way around. But what truly stunned Cassie was Grace. The little girl moved as though she had been waiting for Cassie her entire life. Every morning, Grace stood right outside Cassie's door from the moment the sky began to lighten, patient and still, waiting until Cassie opened it. Then she would take Cassie's hand and tug her down the hall, chattering without stopping. This is the big living room. Mama Victoria liked to sit and read here. Grace pointed toward a space filled with deep red velvet sofas and a marble fireplace. And this is the dining room. This table can seat 20 people. But now it is only Daddy and me, and now you too. Cassie listened to every word, her heart tightening each time Grace mentioned her mother. Grace clearly remembered Victoria. Small pieces of memory, precious and carefully kept through 4 years of silence. Now those memories were pouring out like water after a dam breaks, and Cassie was the only person Grace wanted to share them with. The strange part was that Grace still spoke only to Cassie. When Mrs. Webb asked what she wanted to eat, Grace would turn and whisper into Cassie's ear, and Cassie would answer for her. When Victor came by to check security, Grace would offer a small nod, then slip behind Cassie's back. Grace was not ready to open herself to anyone else, but she was speaking, and that alone felt like a miracle. Marcus did not appear much in those early days. Cassie would catch only a glimpse of him at the far end of a hallway, or hear his voice through the closed door of his office as he spoke on the phone. He was busy. She understood that. Yet she noticed something else. In every room she walked through, there were small cameras set into the corners near the ceiling. Marcus was watching. He was tracking her steps, her expressions, every interaction between her and Grace. Cassie did not know whether she should feel safe or uneasy. Maybe both. On the 3rd day, everything shifted. Cassie was drawing with Grace in the playroom when the door swung open. A woman walked in, tall and polished, with long black hair and gray eyes exactly like Marcus's. She wore a deep red suit, lipstick the same shade, carrying herself with an air of sharp authority. This was not someone who existed on the edge of Marcus's life. This was someone inside it. Natalia Salvatore, Marcus's younger sister. Natalia looked Cassie up and down, her gaze cold as winter. "So you are the one my brother is keeping in this house." Her voice carried a thin, mocking edge. "I have heard the rumors about you." The waitress who suddenly made my niece speak again. Cassie rose, forcing herself to stay calm even as her heart hammered. "I am Cassandra Mitchell. It is nice to meet you." Natalia did not offer her hand. She only folded her arms, studying Cassie with open suspicion. "Where did you come from? What connection do you have to Grace? What do you want from my family?" "I do not want anything," Cassie said. "I do not understand why Grace chose me either. I am only trying to help her." "Help?" Natalia let out a quiet, humorless laugh. "In our world, nobody does anything without a reason. I do not know who you are or what game you are playing, but I am warning you. If you hurt my niece, if you do anything that harms my family, I will handle you myself. And believe me, you do not want that." Grace stood, walked over, and took Cassie's hand, as if she were protecting her. The little girl looked at Natalia without speaking, only tightening her grip on Cassie's fingers. Natalia's eyes flickered with a brief flash of surprise. Then she turned and left the room without another word. Cassie let out a breath she had not realized she was holding, but she knew this was not the end. Natalia would watch her, weigh her, search for any reason at all to prove Cassie was a threat. Cassie would have to prove herself, not only to Natalia, to this entire family. She looked down at Grace, who gazed up at her with absolute trust in her eyes. For this child, Cassie would do it. She had to. A week passed, and Cassie began to understand something important. Grace was slowly opening up. The little girl had started to greet Mrs. Webb in the mornings, and she would nod at Victor when he walked by. But there was one person she still kept at a distance: her father. Every time Marcus appeared, Grace would shrink back, slipping behind Cassie as if she were afraid, and Marcus did the same in his own way. He would stand at the threshold, looking at his daughter with an ache of longing, yet he never stepped inside. As if an invisible wall stood between them, a wall built from 4 years of silence and grief. Cassie understood she could not replace Marcus in Grace's life. She could help the child speak, help her laugh, but Grace needed her father. She needed to know her father still loved her, that he was still here for her, and Marcus needed to know that Grace did not blame him for Victoria's death. They needed each other. They just did not know how to reach for one another. One afternoon, while Grace sat drawing in the playroom, Cassie went to find Marcus. She knocked on the door of his office, her heart beating fast with nervousness. "Come in." Marcus's voice came from inside. Cassie stepped in and found him behind a large wooden desk, papers stacked high in front of him. He looked up, gray eyes flickering with surprise. "Miss Mitchell, is something wrong? Is Grace all right?" "Grace is fine," Cassie nodded. "But I want to talk to you about something else. She needs you." Marcus went quiet, his face turning heavy with thought. "I know, but every time I get close, she gets scared. I do not want to hurt her more than she already has been hurt. She is not afraid of you." Cassie moved a little closer. "She is afraid of losing you. She lost her mother. And for 4 years she has almost lost her father too. Not because you do not love her, but because you are afraid as well. You are afraid to face your own pain." Marcus looked at Cassie, and she saw the cold wall inside him begin to crack. "Do you know the last time I held my daughter?" His voice caught. "It was that night, the night Victoria died. I found Grace in the car, holding my wife's body. I lifted her out, held her tight, swore I would protect her no matter what. But after that, every time I looked into her eyes, I saw Victoria. I saw guilt. I saw my own failure, and I could not stand it." Cassie felt tears rise. She understood his pain, the pain of a father who had lost his wife and did not know how to save his child. "You did not fail," Cassie said softly. "You are still here. You are still fighting for her. But now it is time to fight with her, not alone anymore. Come to Grace's room tonight. Read to her before she sleeps. Just be there with her. I will be there too." That night, Marcus stood outside Grace's bedroom door, like a man preparing to step into the most important battle of his life. Cassie was ready. Grace sat on the bed, holding a teddy bear, waiting. When she saw her father enter, she did not hide the way she usually did. She only looked at him, ocean blue eyes full of caution. "Daddy is going to read to you tonight," Cassie said gently to Grace. "Is that all right?" Grace looked at Cassie, then at Marcus, then slowly nodded. Marcus moved forward, stiff and awkward. He sat on the edge of the bed, keeping a careful distance from his daughter as if he feared he might break something fragile. Cassie handed him the fairy tale Grace loved most and sat on the other side of the bed. Marcus opened the book, his voice unsteady as he began. "Once upon a time, in a faraway kingdom." He read slowly, his deep voice warming, settling into something more natural. At first, Grace stayed close to Cassie, but as the story went on, she gradually edged nearer to her father. By the time Marcus reached the part where the princess was rescued, Grace had rested her head on his shoulder, eyelids heavy with sleep. Marcus stopped, looking down at his daughter, and Cassie saw tears sliding down his cheeks. He did not wipe them away. He simply sat there, one hand holding the book, the other gently smoothing his daughter's hair for the first time in 4 long years. Cassie watched in silence, her heart full to the brim. This was only the first step, but it was the most important step of all, and she knew that from this moment on, everything would be different. 2 weeks passed after the night Marcus read to Grace, and the changes in this house left everyone stunned. Grace was no longer the timid little girl who only whispered to Cassie. Every morning, she came down to the dining room and told Mrs. Webb that today she wanted pancakes with strawberries. The first time Mrs. Webb heard the child's voice aimed directly at her, she nearly dropped the pan. She turned away to wipe her tears, then made Grace not only pancakes with strawberries, but a whole plate of fruit in every color. And Victor, the large man with a face as cold as stone, now received a good morning, Victor from Grace whenever she saw him. Victor did not say anything, but Cassie saw the corner of his mouth lift, just slightly, a small smile that might not have appeared on that face in a very long time. Marcus changed too. He no longer watched from a distance through cameras alone. Every night, he came to Grace's room to read, even if sometimes he managed only a few pages before work pulled him away. Breakfast became time for all 3 of them, sitting around a massive dining table that no longer felt empty. Grace began asking her father about his work, about his trips, about anything her mind could summon. And Marcus, the most powerful kingpin in Chicago, answered every question with a patience and tenderness Cassie never would have believed he could possess. One afternoon, Cassie and Grace were sitting in the backyard garden, where there were rose beds Victoria had planted years earlier. Grace loved coming out here. She could sit for hours watching the flowers and chasing butterflies. Today, she sat in Cassie's lap, her head resting against Cassie's chest, her blue eyes tilted up to the clear sky. "Mama Cassie," Grace spoke softly. "Yes, sweetheart. Where's Mama Victoria?" Cassie felt her heart tighten. It was the first time Grace had asked about her mother so directly. Cassie had known the question would come, but she had not expected it to lodge in her throat like this. She drew a deep breath and worked to keep her voice steady. "Mama Victoria is in heaven, sweetheart," Cassie spoke gently. "It is a very beautiful place, very peaceful, where the people we love go after they leave us. But why is Mama not here with me?" Grace lifted her head, her eyes shining with tears. "I miss Mama." "I know, sweetheart." Cassie held her closer. "Your Mama misses you too. She loves you more than anything in the world. But sometimes the people who love us have to go somewhere else, somewhere we cannot follow. That does not mean they forget us. Your Mama is still here." Cassie placed a hand over Grace's chest. "Right here, in your heart. Every time you miss her, every time you think about her, she is right here." Grace went quiet for a moment, as if turning Cassie's words over in her mind. Then she spoke again, her tone suddenly sure. "Mama Victoria sent you to me." Cassie blinked, not certain she had heard correctly. "What did you say, Grace?" "I dreamed it." Grace lifted her face to Cassie. "Before you came, I dreamed of Mama. Mama wore a white dress, so pretty. Mama told me someone would come. That person would help me find my voice again. That person would love me the way Mama loved me. Mama told me to wait at the club window, and then I would see that person. I waited 4 days. Then I saw you." Tears spilled from Cassie without warning. She did not know what to say. She only held Grace tighter, letting the tears fall onto the child's smooth black hair. Maybe Victoria truly had sent her. Maybe there were things in this world that reason could not explain. Maybe a mother's love was strong enough to cross even the border between life and death. Neither of them knew that Marcus was standing just behind the wall, where the door leading out to the garden was cracked open. He had come to call them in for dinner, but when he heard Grace's question, he stopped, and then he stood there, listening to every word Cassie spoke to his daughter, every word Grace whispered about her dream. When Grace said Victoria had sent Cassie, Marcus felt as if someone had squeezed his heart until it could not breathe. He leaned back against the wall, covered his face with both hands, his shoulders shaking in waves. For the first time in 4 years, Marcus Salvatore cried, not from pain, but because, at last, he could believe that Victoria was still watching over them, still protecting Grace in her own way. And maybe, just maybe, she had forgiven him too. In the days that followed, Cassie began to realize something was changing. Not only was Grace slowly healing, but so was the way Cassie felt about Marcus. Each time he walked into a room, her heart jumped a beat faster. Each time their eyes met, she had to look away, quick and guilty, to hide her flustered confusion. She told herself it was only gratitude, only admiration for a good father doing his best. But deep down, she knew it was not only that. One afternoon, the three of them sat in the playroom, putting together a puzzle that formed a picture of a castle. Grace sat in the middle, thrilled as she hunted down each piece, while Cassie and Marcus sat on either side, helping her. "This one, Daddy." Grace handed Marcus a blue piece. "And this one, for Mama Cassie." Cassie took the piece, and as she reached to set it in place, her fingers brushed Marcus's hand by accident. They both froze, as if a current had snapped through the air between them. Cassie pulled her hand back too fast, heat rushing into her cheeks. She could not bring herself to look at him, but she could feel his gaze lingering on her face. "Sorry," she whispered. "It is all right," Marcus replied, his voice lower than usual. They kept working on the puzzle, but the air between them had shifted, tighter, more charged, and yet warmer. Grace, with the sharp instinct children seem to be born with, appeared to sense it. From that day on, she began finding every possible way to push Cassie and Marcus closer. When they watched a movie, Grace insisted they sit side by side on the sofa, while she sprawled across them, her head in Cassie's lap, and her feet resting on Marcus's. At dinner, Grace switched seats so Cassie had to sit right next to Marcus instead of across from him as before. On walks in the garden, Grace ran ahead, leaving the two adults to walk together in a silence that somehow carried meaning. One night, after reading Grace to sleep, Cassie and Marcus stepped out of the child's room together. The hallway was dark and quiet, lit only by soft yellow lamps along the walls. "She has improved so much," Marcus said, his voice low. "Thank you." Cassie shook her head. "It is not because of me. It is because of you. You stepped out of your fear and came close to her. That is what mattered most." Marcus stopped and turned to her. His gray eyes, in the dim light, looked deeper, more intense. "You know, before you came, I thought this house would stay in the dark forever. I accepted that Grace would never speak again, that I would never hear her laugh." He took one step closer, and Cassie felt her breath hitch. "Then you appeared, and everything changed." Cassie looked up, her green eyes meeting his. Only a few inches remained between them now. She could catch the faint trace of his cologne, could see every hard line of that angular face. Her heart slammed wildly against her ribs. "Marcus," she whispered, not even sure what she meant to say next. Marcus lifted his hand, as if he meant to touch her cheek, and then he stopped. His fingers curled into a fist, and slowly, he lowered his arm. "You should get some rest," he said, his voice gone rough. "It is late." Then he turned and walked away, fast, toward his study, leaving Cassie alone in the hallway with her pulse still racing. That night, Cassie lay in bed, restless, unable to sleep. She thought about the way Marcus had looked at her, about the moment he had almost touched her, about how he had left so abruptly, as if he were running from something. She should not be feeling this. He was a Mafia boss. He was the man who employed her. He was a widower who still loved his late wife. But she could not control her heart. It had begun to beat for Marcus Salvatore, and she did not know what to do with that. And Marcus, in his study, was staring up at the ceiling with the same kind of thoughts. He should not look at her that way, should not want to touch her, should not feel his heart come alive again every time she smiled. But he did, and that frightened him more than any enemy he had ever faced. 3 days after that moment in the hallway, Marcus and Cassie behaved as if nothing had happened. They still played with Grace. They still ate dinner together. They still read to her every night. But something had shifted. The stolen glances, the silences that stretched too long, the way they carefully kept their distance so they would not brush each other by accident. The air between them felt heavy, like the pressure before a storm, and Cassie knew it could not go on like this forever. That night, she could not sleep. After tossing and turning for hours, she finally got up and went down to the garden, hoping the cold, clean air might steady her. The moon hung bright and unwavering, washing the grounds in a silvery, dreamlike light. The roses Victoria had planted swayed gently in the night breeze, their fragrance soft and sweet. Cassie sat on the stone bench beside the fountain and tipped her face up toward the star-filled sky. She did not expect she would not be the only one awake. "You cannot sleep either." Marcus's voice came from behind her, and Cassie turned with a small start. He stood there without the suit he always wore, dressed only in a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up and black trousers. He looked less frightening like this, closer, more human. "May I sit here?" Cassie nodded, and he lowered himself onto the bench beside her, leaving a careful space between them. For a while, they said nothing, both watching the moonlight ripple across the water. Then Marcus spoke, his voice low, distant, as if it had traveled a long way to reach the present. "Have you ever wondered why I became the kind of man I am?" Cassie turned to look at him. "I have thought about it, but I do not want to judge. Everyone has their reasons." Marcus gave a faint smile, but it did not reach his eyes. "My father was the previous Salvatore. He built this empire from nothing, with blood and sweat, with things I do not even want to imagine. When I was born, my future was already decided. I would inherit it. I did not have a choice." He looked down at his hands. "I tried to escape. When I was 18, I ran. I meant to start a new life in another city, but my father found me. He did not force me. He did not threaten me. He only said that if I left, the family would collapse, and the people who depended on us would lose their protection, and I would live the rest of my life with that weight on my back." Marcus let out a long breath. "So I came home. I learned how to become the man my father needed me to be, and then I met Victoria." He spoke his wife's name with a tenderness Cassie had never heard in him before. "She knew who I was from the beginning. I did not hide it. I thought she would be afraid. I thought she would run. But she stayed. She said she did not love what I did, but she loved who I was. She believed there was still something good inside me, and because of her, I tried to be better." He turned toward Cassie, and pain filled his eyes. "Then I lost her, and I thought the good in me died with her." Cassie felt tears rise, sudden and hot. She understood his grief. She understood what it meant to lose the one person who made the world feel survivable. "I understand," she whispered. "My father left when I was 8. No explanation. No goodbye. One day he was there, and the next day he was gone. My mother had to work 2, sometimes 3 jobs to raise me. She worked 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. She never complained. She never cried in front of me. She only said we would be all right, that having each other was enough. Cassie lifted her eyes to the moon, her voice thickening. Then she got sick. Cancer. I dropped out of school to take care of her. I did everything I could to earn money for treatment. But it was not enough. It was never enough. She died, and I was left alone with the debt and the feeling that I had failed. Marcus reached out and took Cassie's hand. His grip was warm and steady. You did not fail, he said softly. You fought until the very end for the person you loved. That is not failure. That is courage. Cassie looked down at their hands, fingers intertwined, then up into Marcus's face. In the moonlight, his gray eyes were no longer cold. They shimmered with something gentler, something alive. Maybe we are more alike than I thought, she said. We are both wounded. We are both trying to keep going. Maybe we are saving each other. Marcus tightened his hold on her hand. Maybe we are, he murmured. Maybe that is why you appeared in our lives. They sat there in silence, hand in hand beneath the silver moon. No more words were needed. Tonight, they had opened themselves to each other, and that was the first step. 1 week after that night of talking in the garden, Natalia Salvatore returned. This time, she did not come alone. She brought with her the suspicion she had been feeding for days, the rumors she had heard about the strange woman living in her brother's house, and a determination to uncover the truth. Cassie was in the kitchen with Grace, making cookies, when Natalia walked in. Her high heels clicked sharply against the marble floor. Mrs. Webb had tried to stop her, but Natalia brushed past without slowing, her icy gray eyes sweeping the room before landing on Cassie. Miss Mitchell, we need to talk, Natalia said, her voice cold as winter. Just the 2 of us. Grace lifted her head, recognizing her aunt. But instead of running to greet her the way she used to with family, Grace moved closer to Cassie and slipped her small hand into Cassie's. Aunt Natalia, what do you want to say to Mama Cassie? She asked, her voice bright and clear. Natalia froze. Her eyes widened at the sound of her niece's voice, the voice she had not heard in 4 years. But she pulled herself together quickly, her face hardening again. Grace, go play outside for a little while. I need to speak with Miss Mitchell. No. Grace shook her head and tightened her grip on Cassie's hand. I am not going anywhere. Before Natalia could say another word, Marcus appeared in the kitchen doorway. He had heard the familiar sound of those heels and knew his sister had arrived. Natalia, what is this about? Marcus asked, calm on the surface, but watchful in his eyes. Natalia turned toward him, frustration flashing across her face. What is it about? I came to ask you why you are letting a strange woman live in our house, take care of my niece, without even bothering to ask anyone. What do you know about her? Where did she come from? What does she want? I know enough, Marcus said, stepping into the kitchen to stand beside Cassie and Grace. I know she is the one who made my daughter speak again after 4 years. I know she truly loves Grace, and I know she has no bad intentions. Are you sure? Natalia stepped closer, her voice sharpening. Are you sure she is not someone DeLuca sent? Not a con artist after your money? Not. Enough. Marcus cut her off, his voice turning cold. You are my sister, and I love you, but I will not allow you to insult Cassie in my home. She saved my daughter. She brought back to this house what no one has been able to bring back in 4 years. If you cannot accept that, you can leave. Natalia stared at her brother, shock plain on her face. She had never seen Marcus protect anyone like that except Victoria, and that made her hesitate. It made her reconsider. Just then, Grace released Cassie's hand and walked over to Natalia. She tilted her face up, her blue eyes clear as glass. Aunt Natalia, please do not be mad at Mama Cassie. Mama Cassie is really good. She reads to me, she plays with me, she teaches me how to bake. She has not done anything bad. Grace reached up and touched Natalia's hand. I miss you. Do you want to eat the cookies I made? Natalia stood there, her body turning to stone. She looked down at her niece, the child who had been silent for 4 years, now standing in front of her, speaking, smiling, offering her cookies. Tears slid down Natalia's cheeks. She could not hold them back. She dropped to her knees and pulled Grace into a fierce embrace, her shoulders trembling in waves. You can talk, Natalia whispered through a broken voice. Oh God, you can talk. Grace hugged her back and patted Natalia's shoulder the way Cassie always soothed her. Yes, I can talk. Mama Cassie helped me. Natalia lifted her head and looked at Cassie with eyes wet with tears. All the suspicion, the chill, the hostility had melted completely away. What remained was a deep gratitude and a sharp, aching regret. Miss Mitchell. Natalia rose and stepped in front of Cassie. I am sorry. I was wrong. I doubted you. I treated you badly. But you did what no one has been able to do in 4 years. You brought my niece back to us. I do not even know how to thank you. Then Natalia did something Cassie never would have expected. She wrapped her arms around Cassie, tight and sincere. Welcome to the Salvatore family, Natalia whispered into her ear. Whether you want it or not. 2 days after Natalia's visit, another guest arrived at the Salvatore estate. A sleek black car rolled to a stop at the gate, and an older woman stepped out. Her silver hair was pinned into a neat bun, her frame slender, and her sea-blue eyes were the very same eyes Victoria once had. Margaret Harrison, Victoria's mother, Grace's grandmother. She had not set foot here since her daughter's funeral 4 years ago, and Marcus knew her appearance was not a coincidence. Marcus met her at the front door, his face tight with strain. His relationship with his mother-in-law had never been good. Margaret blamed him for Victoria's death, believing that if her daughter had not married a mafia boss, she would still be alive. She was not wrong. Marcus blamed himself every day, but that did not make their meetings any less painful. Mrs. Harrison. Marcus gave a small nod of greeting. You came without notice. Margaret looked at him, her gaze cold. I heard there is a strange woman living in this house, taking care of my granddaughter. I believe I have a right to know who she is. Marcus drew in a slow breath. Please come in. We will talk inside. They entered the living room, and the air grew so heavy it felt like it could be cut with a knife. Margaret sat on the sofa with her back perfectly straight, the posture of a woman born to command a room. Marcus sat across from her, keeping distance, as if he were facing an enemy rather than his wife's mother. Who is Cassie? Margaret asked bluntly. Why is she here? And why did you not tell me? She is Grace's caregiver, Marcus said. She appeared a month ago, and Grace spoke to her. Spoke. Margaret lifted an eyebrow, skepticism sharp on her face. You want me to believe that after 4 years of silence, my granddaughter suddenly speaks to a stranger? It is the truth, Marcus said. Whether you believe it or not, I want to meet her. Margaret rose to her feet, and I want to see my granddaughter. Right now. Marcus led Margaret upstairs, to where Cassie and Grace were playing in the playroom. He pushed the door open, and what Margaret saw stopped her in place. Grace sat on the floor, surrounded by bright puzzle pieces. She was laughing, that clear, ringing laugh filling the room. Beside her sat a young woman with auburn brown hair and gentle green eyes. They were talking. Grace chattered about a cat she wanted to keep, and Cassie listened with a warm smile. Grace lifted her head when she heard the door. Her blue eyes lit up the instant she recognized the woman at the threshold. Grandma, Grace shouted as she sprang up and ran to Margaret. Grandma is here. I missed you so much. Margaret went still. She stared at her granddaughter racing toward her, calling Grandma again and again, and she could not believe her own ears. Was this Grace, the child who had been silent as a shadow for 4 long years? Grace, Margaret whispered, her voice trembling. You are talking. You are really talking. Grace threw her arms around her grandmother, small hands squeezing tight around her waist. Yes, Grandma, I can talk again. Mama Cassie helped me find my voice. I am not scared anymore. Margaret dropped to her knees and gathered Grace into her arms, tears spilling without restraint. She cried, the sobs breaking loose after 4 years of holding everything in. She had thought she would never hear her granddaughter's voice again. She had thought Victoria's death had taken Grace's spirit with it. But now her granddaughter was in her arms, speaking, laughing. My child, Margaret whispered, stroking Grace's hair. My sweet girl, I missed you so much. Grace lifted her face, took her grandmother's hand, and tugged her toward Cassie. Grandma, this is Mama Cassie. She is really good to me. She reads to me, she plays with me, and she tells me Mama Victoria still loves me from heaven. Do you like her? Margaret stood, her eyes still wet with tears. Cassie bowed her head politely, unsure what to say. She understood how hard her presence might be for this woman, a woman who had lost her daughter, and now had to watch someone else take a place in her granddaughter's heart. I am Cassandra Mitchell, Cassie said softly. I am so sorry for your loss. Victoria must have been a wonderful mother. Margaret was silent for a long moment, studying Cassie from head to toe. Then she looked at Grace, who was holding Cassie's hand with absolute trust. And Margaret understood. You did what no one else could do, Margaret said, her voice no longer cold, but thick with gratitude. You brought my granddaughter back. She stepped closer and placed a hand on Cassie's shoulder. Victoria, my daughter, if she were still here, she would thank you. And so do I. Thank you, Cassandra. Thank you for loving my granddaughter. Cassie felt her own tears spill over. She could not speak. She only nodded. And when Margaret pulled her into an embrace, Cassie knew she had been truly accepted into this family. Not through paperwork or marriage, but through the love she had given to a little girl who had called her Mama. Happiness never lasts forever. Cassie had learned that lesson from a life built on hard turns and sudden loss, but she never imagined the darkness would return so quickly. 1 week after Margaret's visit, things began to shift. Cassie noticed Marcus growing more tense. He spent longer hours in his office, speaking on the phone in a low voice, edged with worry. Jimmy appeared more often, and the two of them held closed-door meetings that lasted for hours. Even Victor, usually unshakable, now kept his hand near the gun, hidden beneath his suit jacket. Cassie did not ask questions. She knew Marcus's world was not a place she could step into. But she could feel something terrible moving closer. Then, one afternoon, when she took Grace into the garden to play, a chill slid down the back of her neck. Someone was watching her. She turned, scanning the grounds, but nothing looked out of place. Only the high walls, the line of evergreen trees, and a dull gray sky that promised a storm. Yet the feeling did not leave. It clung to her all day, like an invisible ghost stalking just behind her shoulder. That night, Cassie received a text from an unknown number. No message, just a photograph. Her heart stopped when the image filled her screen. It was a picture of her and Grace in the garden earlier that day, taken from somewhere outside the estate wall. She went to Marcus immediately. He was in his office with Jimmy, his expression darkening as Cassie burst in. But the moment she handed him her phone, his face drained, turning from shadowed to bone white. Marcus said nothing. He only stared at the photograph, jaw clenched tight, gray eyes igniting with a fury Cassie had never seen before. "Frank DeLuca," Jimmy said, his voice taut. "He made bail last week. His lawyer won the appeal." Cassie felt the blood in her veins turn to ice. Frank DeLuca, the name Marcus had spoken in the story of Victoria. The man who had ordered his wife's murder. The man who had shattered Grace's life. And now he was watching Cassie and the little girl. From that night on, everything changed. Marcus doubled security. More guards patrolled the estate 24 hours a day. Cameras appeared on every corner, even in places that had never been monitored before. The main gate stayed locked. No one entered or left without Marcus's approval. Grace and Cassie were forbidden to leave the estate. The garden, the place Grace loved most, became off limits. But what broke Cassie's heart was not the restrictions. It was the way Marcus treated her. He grew cold, distant. No more evenings of reading stories together. No more breakfasts with the three of them at the table. Marcus vanished into his office at dawn and did not reappear until late at night. When they crossed paths in the hallway, he would only nod and move past her, as if she were a stranger. Cassie tried to speak to him, but he always found a reason to avoid her. Work, meetings, something urgent. There was always something more important than her. Grace noticed, too. "Why doesn't Daddy read to me anymore?" she asked one night, her blue eyes heavy with worry. "Is Daddy mad at me?" "No, sweetheart." Cassie pulled her into her arms. "Daddy is just very busy. Daddy loves you so much." But Cassie was not sure she was telling the truth. She did not know what Marcus was thinking. She did not know why he was pushing her away at the very moment she needed him most. Then, one day, a large envelope arrived at the estate. No sender, no return address. Inside were dozens of photographs of Cassie and Grace, taken at different times over the past week. In the garden, through the window, even when they were inside the house. And on the final photograph, there was a line of messy, handwritten words. "I lost everything because of Salvatore. Now it is his turn." Marcus tore the envelope apart, his face so pale it looked as if every drop of blood had fled. He turned to Cassie, and in those gray eyes she saw raw, absolute fear. Not fear for himself. Fear for her, for Grace, for the people he loved and did not know how to protect. And Cassie understood then, with a certainty that tightened her throat. The real war had only just begun. A week passed beneath a suffocating weight. Grace began to fold back into herself, no longer chattering the way she had before. She could feel that something was wrong, and being shut inside the house made her quiet and sad. Cassie did everything she could to keep Grace smiling, but she, too, was stretched to her limit. She missed the sunlight in the garden. She missed the morning bird song. She missed the sense of freedom she had only just begun to taste in this place. And more than anything, she missed Marcus. Not the cold Marcus who avoided her, but the Marcus who had sat beside her under moonlight, who had held her hand and trusted her with the deepest secrets of his heart. Cassie could not endure it anymore. That night, after she put Grace to bed, Cassie went straight to Marcus's study. She did not knock. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. Marcus sat behind his desk, staring at his computer screen, his face drawn and hollow with exhaustion. He looked up at the sound of the door, a flicker of surprise crossing his gray eyes before his familiar chill returned. "Miss Mitchell, I am busy." Cassie did not back away. "I do not care what you are busy with. We need to talk. Right now." Marcus frowned, clearly unaccustomed to anyone speaking to him in that tone. "We have nothing to talk about. You and Grace are safe. That is what matters." "Safe." Cassie stepped closer, planted both hands on the desk, and met his gaze head-on. "You call this safe? You have locked us in this house like prisoners. Grace cannot go outside. She cannot play in the garden. She cannot do anything. She is suffering. And what about you? You hide in this room all day, avoiding us as if we are a disease. You cannot keep us caged forever, Marcus." Marcus rose so fast his chair scraped. His hand slammed down on the desk. The crack of it made Cassie flinch, but she did not retreat. "You think I am locking you in?" Marcus roared, his voice thick with pain and fury. "You think I want this? You think I enjoy watching Grace miserable, enjoy avoiding you every day? You do not understand. You do not understand anything." "Then explain it to me," Cassie shouted back. "Tell me why you are pushing us away. Why you?" "Because Victoria said the same thing." Marcus cut her off. His voice dropped suddenly, heavy with despair. "She said I could not keep her locked away. She said she needed freedom. She needed to go out. She needed to live a normal life. And I listened. I let her go, and she died." Marcus leaned back against the wall, as if his body had run out of strength. "She died in front of our daughter, Cassie, because I was not hard enough to keep her at home. Because I put what she wanted above her safety. You think I am going to make that mistake again?" Cassie felt her heart break at the sight of the agony in his eyes. She understood. He was not pushing her away out of coldness. He was pushing her away out of fear. Fear of losing Cassie the way he had lost Victoria. "Marcus, that was not your fault." Cassie stepped closer, her voice softening. "Victoria died because of DeLuca, not because of you. You cannot punish yourself forever. You do not know," Marcus whispered. "You do not know what it feels like to lose the person you love." "I do." Cassie stood right in front of him now, close enough to see every fracture of grief inside those gray eyes. "I lost my mother. I know what it feels like to watch someone you love slip away and be unable to stop it. But Marcus, you cannot let fear control your life. You cannot push everyone away just because you are afraid of losing them." Marcus looked at her, and Cassie saw the wall he had built beginning to collapse, piece by piece. "You do not understand," he whispered. "I am not only afraid of losing Grace. I am afraid of losing you." He lifted his hand and touched Cassie's cheek, his fingers trembling. "You have become part of our life. You changed everything. And if something happens to you because of me, because of this damned Salvatore name, I will not survive it. I cannot lose you, Cassie. I cannot." Cassie felt tears spill over. She placed her hand over Marcus's hand against her face and held it there, tight. "You will not lose me," she whispered. "I am here. I am not going anywhere." And then Marcus did what they had both been holding back for far too long. He bent down and kissed her. Their first kiss was not gentle, not sweet the way it looks in movies. It was desperate. It was filled with fear and hunger. It was two people who had lost too much, finally finding each other in the dark. Cassie wrapped her arms around Marcus's neck and pulled him closer. He held her as if she were the only lifeline left in a wild, endless sea. And in that moment, there was no DeLuca, no danger, no fear. There were only two people, two hearts beating in the same rhythm, and a promise that did not need words. They would face it all, together. 2 days after their first kiss, Marcus had to leave to deal with an urgent matter. He did not want to go, but Jimmy said they had important information about DeLuca and they needed to act immediately. Victor and the security team went with Marcus, leaving only a handful of guards at the estate. He kissed Cassie's forehead before he left and promised he would be back before evening. She watched his car disappear beyond the gate, a vague, uneasy feeling rising in her chest. She did not know that this was exactly what DeLuca had been waiting for. He had been watching the estate for weeks, waiting for the perfect moment. And that moment had arrived. That afternoon, Cassie was in the kitchen with Grace, baking. Mrs. Webb was beside them, helping them knead the dough and telling funny stories about her younger days. Grace giggled, her hands covered in flour, her cheeks smeared with cream. Everything felt strangely peaceful, until the doorbell rang. Mrs. Webb went to answer it, and that was the last thing Cassie heard before the sound of a heavy body slamming onto the floor echoed through the house. Cassie sprang up, survival instinct snapping awake. "Mrs. Webb," she called out, but there was no reply. Instead, she heard footsteps, many footsteps, coming toward the kitchen. Grace looked up, blue eyes wide with fear. "Mama Cassie, what is happening?" Cassie did not have time to explain. She scooped Grace into her arms and ran for the back staircase Marcus had shown her for emergencies. The safe room. She had to get Grace to the safe room. Her heart hammered. Her feet moved so fast, she nearly tripped. Behind her, she heard the guards shouting, the thud of bodies, the crash of breaking glass. They were fighting, but she knew there were not enough of them to withstand a coordinated attack. Cassie raced up to the second floor and turned into the east hallway. The safe room was at the very end, disguised as a large wardrobe. Marcus had given her the code and made her memorize it. She had never thought she would need it. She stopped at the door and punched in the code with trembling fingers. The door opened, revealing a small room with thick steel walls and an independent communication system. Cassie set Grace down inside, then knelt until her eyes were level with the child's. "Stay here, all right." She tried to keep her voice steady even as panic surged inside her. "Do not open the door for anyone. Do you hear me? Only open it when you hear Daddy's voice or my voice. Do you understand?" Grace started to cry, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Mama Cassie, do not go. I am scared." "I am scared too, sweetheart." Cassie kissed Grace's forehead. "But I have to protect you. I love you. Remember, do not open the door." She closed the safe room door and heard the automatic lock engage. Grace was safe. Now she had to handle the rest. Cassie turned around, and her heart seemed to stop. Two men stood at the far end of the hallway, blocking the only way out. They were dressed in black, faces hard, knives in their hands. One of them smiled, a smile that made Cassie's skin crawl. "Where is the little girl?" he asked, his voice rough. "Hand her over and we will let you live." Cassie stood in front of the safe room door, back straight, eyes locked on them. She knew she had no chance. She did not know how to fight. She had no weapon, nothing but her thin body. But she would not let them touch Grace, even if it killed her. "You will have to step over my corpse," Cassie said, her voice steadier than she expected. The two men glanced at each other and laughed. "Fine," one of them said, "if that is what you want." They rushed her. Cassie dodged the first strike, but the second hit her shoulder and sent her crashing to the floor. Pain shot through her, but she forced herself up, grabbed a flower vase from a shelf, and smashed it into one man's head. He staggered, blood running down his face. The other man snarled, seized Cassie by the hair, and yanked hard. She screamed, but she still clawed and kicked, doing anything she could to keep them from reaching the door behind her. The path to Grace went through her first, and she would not fall. Time stretched into something endless. Cassie was beaten, kicked, dragged across the floor. Her cheek swelled, her lips split. Blood poured from a wound on her forehead, but she did not give up. Every time they moved toward the door, she threw herself in their way. She became the last wall protecting Grace, and that wall would not collapse. Then gunshots cracked through the hallway. One man dropped, then the second. Cassie lifted her head, her vision blurred by blood spilling into her eyes. Victor stood at the end of the corridor, the gun smoking in his hand. Behind him was the security team, back in time. "Miss Mitchell." Victor rushed to her, his normally stone-cold face tight with worry. "Are you all right? Where is Grace?" "The safe room," Cassie whispered, her voice weak. "She is safe." And then she collapsed in Victor's arms, the first time she allowed her body to rest after completing the most important mission of her life, protecting a child she loved as if she were her own. Marcus drove like a madman on the way back to the estate after Victor's call. He could not remember how many red lights he ran, how many cars he nearly hit. His mind held only one thought: Cassie and Grace. He had to get back to them. When the car skidded to a stop in front of the mansion, he jumped out before the engine had even died. What he saw squeezed the breath out of his chest. Shattered glass, furniture overturned, blood smeared across the floor. Paramedics were already there, lifting Mrs. Webb onto a stretcher. She had been knocked unconscious, but her life was not in danger. Marcus did not stop to ask questions. He ran inside, up the stairs, toward the east corridor Victor had mentioned. He saw Cassie sitting with her back against the wall, right in front of the safe room door. Her face was bruised and swollen, her lips split, dried blood streaked across her forehead. A medic was wrapping a bandage around her arm. And Grace. Grace was in Cassie's lap, clinging to her, sobbing hard. "Cassie." Marcus dropped to his knees beside her, his hands trembling as he reached for her battered face. "My God. Cassie, Cassie. I am okay." Cassie tried to smile, even though the pain was plain in her eyes. "Just a few scrapes. Do not worry." Marcus stared at her, at the bruises and cuts, the evidence of a fight she had never been trained to face. Rage and guilt twisted in his chest until he felt he might scream. He had not been here. He had left her alone. Once again, he had failed to protect the people he loved. "Daddy." Grace lifted her head, her eyes red from crying. "Daddy, bad men came. They wanted to take me, but Mama Cassie would not let them. She hid me in the room, and then she fought them. She did not run. She stood there and did not let them through." Grace tightened her grip on Cassie's hand, her voice shaking with fear and shining with pride at the same time. "Mama Cassie was so brave, Daddy. She was brave like you." Marcus looked at his daughter, then at Cassie. He felt tears spill over, something he thought he had forgotten how to do. He pulled them both into his arms and held them tight, as if they might vanish the moment he let go. They sat there, the three of them, in a hallway marked by blood and violence, and yet they were still together. That was the only thing that mattered. When Grace finally calmed down, Mrs. Webb, awake now and insisting on taking care of the little girl, led her away to bathe and change, leaving Marcus and Cassie alone. He sat beside her on a sofa in the living room, holding her hand like it was the only thread tethering him to reality. "You were willing to die for my daughter," Marcus whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "You stood there alone, unarmed, facing 2 hired killers. You knew you had no chance, and you still did not run. Why?" Cassie turned to him, her green eyes gentle despite the exhaustion. "Because Grace is my child. Maybe not by blood, but in my heart she is mine. And a mother will do anything to protect her child." She squeezed Marcus's hand a little tighter. "I will do anything for my family, Marcus. For Grace. For you. For this home. This is my family now. The only family I have." Marcus felt his heart break and mend in the same instant. He lifted his hand and touched her cheek carefully, avoiding the bruises. "I am sorry," he whispered. "I should have been here. I should have protected you." "You did protect us," Cassie said softly. "You prepared the safe room. You taught me the code. You hired men like Victor. Without those things, we would not have made it." Marcus lowered his head and kissed her forehead, her cheek, her mouth, gentle and reverent. "I love you." He said it, the first time he had spoken those words since Victoria died. "I love you, Cassandra Mitchell. And I will not let anyone hurt you again. DeLuca will pay for what he has done." Cassie rested her head on his shoulder, her eyes closing with exhaustion. "I know," she whispered. "I believe you." And they sat there in the ruined living room, in the quiet after the storm, more at peace than they had ever been, because they had each other, and that was enough. A week after the attack, Marcus disappeared. He did not tell Cassie where he was going. He only kissed her and promised he would come back. Jimmy, Victor, and most of the security team went with him. Cassie did not ask. She knew there were things in Marcus's world she should not know, did not need to know. All she needed was to trust him, and she did. 3 days later, Marcus returned. He looked exhausted, but his gray eyes were lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He did not speak about the trip. He only held Cassie tightly and whispered that it was over. DeLuca would never threaten their family again. Cassie did not ask for details. She did not want to know where DeLuca was, or what had happened to him. She only knew the nightmare had ended, and her family was finally safe. A month passed after that day. The mansion had been repaired. The wounds had healed. Life slowly returned to normal. No, not normal. Better than normal. Grace had completely recovered. She talked to everyone now, laughed, played, lived like any 5-year-old child. Mrs. Webb was well again, and still stubbornly refused to rest, even when Marcus offered to send her on a trip. Victor, the quiet hero, still stood guard with his stone-cold face. Yet now and then Cassie caught him smiling when he watched Grace running through the halls. And Marcus had changed. He no longer hid inside his office. He made time for Grace and Cassie. They ate breakfast together. He read stories every night. He even tried to learn how to bake, though the results were usually a disaster. He laughed more. He loved more openly. He lived more fully. One late spring afternoon, Marcus told Cassie and Grace to dress nicely, because he had a surprise he wanted to show them. Cassie was curious, but she did not ask. She put on the white dress Marcus had just given her, then helped Grace into her favorite pink dress. They followed Marcus into the back garden, where the rose beds Victoria had planted still bloomed. Cassie stopped in amazement. The garden had been transformed. Small lanterns hung from the branches. Fresh flowers filled vases placed along the path. A red carpet stretched from the back door all the way toward the fountain. Victoria's garden now looked like a scene pulled straight out of a fairy tale. Marcus led them to the center, where a small table covered in a white cloth waited. On it sat a bouquet of red roses, and a small velvet box. Cassie's heart began to race the moment she saw that box. She turned to Marcus. He was looking at her with an expression full of love. "Cassie." Marcus took her hand, his voice warm and steady. "4 years ago, I lost the woman I loved. I thought my life was over. I buried myself in work, in darkness, in pain. I watched my daughter sink into silence, and I could not do anything. I gave up hope." His grip tightened, as if he were holding on to something real to keep himself from falling back into the past. "Then you appeared. A waitress in my club, with green eyes and the strongest heart I have ever known. You did the impossible. You made my daughter speak. You brought this house back to life. You made me believe in love again." Marcus lowered himself to one knee. He opened the velvet box. A diamond ring flashed in the late afternoon light. Cassie felt tears rise instantly. She lifted her hand to cover her mouth, unable to believe what was happening. "Cassandra Mitchell, you saved my daughter. You saved me. You were ready to trade your life to protect this family. I do not deserve you. I know that. I am a man with a dark past and an uncertain future. But I love you. I love you with everything I have." Marcus looked up at her, and his gray eyes shimmered. "Will you be my wife? Will you become Grace's mother, officially, forever? Will you give me the chance to love you for the rest of my life?" Before Cassie could answer, Grace bounced in place and shouted with all the fierce joy of a 5-year-old. "Say yes, Mama Cassie. Say yes. I want Mama Cassie to stay with us forever. I want a family. Say yes." Cassie broke into a laugh through her tears. She looked down at Marcus. She looked at Grace. She looked at the garden overflowing with Victoria's roses. She thought about the road that had brought her here, from a crumbling apartment on the south side to this grand estate, from a lonely girl drowning in debt to a woman loved by a feared man and a child who felt like an angel. Her life had changed completely since the night Grace called her Mama. "Yes." Cassie's voice shook with happiness. "Yes. 1,000,000 times yes." Marcus rose, slid the ring onto Cassie's finger, then pulled her into his arms and kissed her there among the roses. Grace cheered and danced around them, shouting that Mama Cassie would be her real mom now, that Daddy was going to marry Mama Cassie. And somewhere in the soft evening wind, carrying the scent of roses, Cassie felt something like a blessing. Victoria's blessing. The woman who had loved Marcus, who had given birth to Grace, and perhaps, in some way beyond logic, had sent Cassie to continue the work of loving this family. 3 months after the proposal, the wedding was held right at the Salvatore estate. Marcus and Cassie chose a small, intimate ceremony, with only the people closest to them. There were no hundreds of guests like the society weddings people expected. No reporters, no cameras, just family and the ones who truly mattered. The back garden was dressed in white and pink flowers. Soft ribbons drifted in the breeze. An arch of blooms stood in front of the fountain, the very place where Marcus had asked Cassie to marry him. Chairs were arranged in 2 short rows, enough for about 30 people. Natalia sat in the front, smiling with quiet pride. Margaret sat beside her, fingers clenched around a handkerchief, eyes already wet even before the ceremony began. Mrs. Webb, Victor, Jimmy, and everyone who had become their family along the way were there, every face bright with joy. In the bridal room, Cassie stood before the mirror, studying herself in a wedding dress as white as fresh snow. The gown was simple, yet elegant. It fit close through the bodice, then flared softly from the waist, the train just long enough to give it grace. Her hair was swept into a high chignon, leaving her throat bare and delicate, with a few loose curls falling along her cheeks. She almost did not recognize herself. The woman in the glass was no longer the exhausted girl working 3 jobs a day. No longer the woman buried under debt, staring down a future with no light in it. The woman in the mirror was glowing, lit from the inside by happiness. A gentle knock sounded at the door, and Margaret stepped in. She wore a pale blue dress. Her silver hair was smooth and neat. But what caught Cassie's attention was the small box in Margaret's hands. "My daughter," Margaret said. Cassie felt warmth flood her chest at the way she was addressed. "I have something I want to give you." Margaret opened the box, revealing pearl earrings rimmed with diamonds, catching the light with every breath. "These are the earrings Victoria wore on her wedding day," Margaret said, her voice trembling slightly. "My daughter was so happy that day, and I know, if she were still alive, she would want you to wear them today." Cassie felt tears rise and spill. "Mrs. Harrison, I do not know what to say. Just wear them," Margaret replied. With gentle hands, she fastened the earrings onto Cassie, the touch, careful, almost tender. "And be happy, my daughter. Love Marcus and Grace the way Victoria loved them. That is all I want." The two women embraced, no more words needed. In that moment, Cassie felt as if Victoria were near, blessing her, quietly, from somewhere beyond sight. When the wedding music began, Grace stepped out first as the flower girl. She wore a little white dress that flared when she moved. A small crown of flowers rested on her head. In her hands she carried a basket of rose petals, scattering them down the aisle. She counted each step with serious concentration, dropping each petal the way she had practiced again and again. People smiled at the sight, but everyone held their breath when Cassie appeared at the end of the aisle. Marcus stood beneath the flower arch, and when he saw her, he seemed to forget how to breathe. Cassie walked slowly, each step bringing her closer to the man she loved, and to the new life she had chosen. When she reached him, Marcus took her hand, his eyes shining. The officiant began. But for Marcus and Cassie, there was only one truth in that moment. It was just the two of them. When it came time for vows, Marcus spoke first. "Cassie, you came to me when I had no hope left. You brought light into this dark house. You brought laughter back to my daughter. You brought love back to my heart. I am not perfect. I have a dark past, and I will always have enemies. But I swear I will protect you with my life. I swear I will love you every day until my last breath. I swear I will make you happy, because you deserve happiness more than anyone I have ever known." Cassie gripped his hand tighter, her voice breaking as she answered. "Marcus, you saved me when I had nothing left. You gave me a home when I was about to end up on the street. You gave me a family when I thought I would be alone forever. I swear I will love Grace as my own child. I swear I will stand beside you through every storm. I swear I will be your home, the place you can return to after long, exhausting days, because you are my family. You and Grace are all I need." When they exchanged rings and were pronounced husband and wife, Marcus bent and kissed Cassie, and the garden erupted in applause and cheers. Grace ran forward at once, wedging herself between them, demanding a hug. Marcus lifted her up, and the three of them held each other in the most perfect moment of all. "Now we are a real family," Grace shouted, her blue eyes bright with joy. "Daddy and Mama Cassie got married. I have Daddy and I have Mama. We are a real family now." "Yes, my love," Cassie said, kissing Grace's cheek as happy tears rolled down her face. "We are a family, forever." And under the afternoon sun, in Victoria's rose garden, a new family was born at last, not by blood, but by love, by choice, and by the miracle of one small word, Mama. 1 year after the wedding, the Salvatore estate was filled with laughter and sunlight. Everything had changed for the better in a way no one could have imagined. Cassie had finished the final year of her master's program in social work that she had abandoned years earlier due to her mother's illness. She graduated at the top of her class, and Marcus sat in the front row at the commencement, holding Grace in his arms, the two of them clapping louder than anyone in the hall when her name was called. But Cassie did not stop there. With Marcus's support, she opened a center for children with psychological trauma, named Victoria's Hope. The center offered free counseling services for children who had lived through loss and pain, helping them find their voices and their joy again, the way Grace had. Every day, Cassie went to the center with love and devotion, knowing she was carrying Victoria's legacy forward in the most meaningful way. Grace was 6 now, bright and lively, and endlessly talkative. She had started school and quickly made friends with everyone in her class. Her teacher said Grace was the most outgoing student, always ready to help her classmates, with an imagination richer than anyone expected. No one could believe this was the same little girl who had been silent for 4 years. A miracle had happened, and it had begun with one word, Mama, spoken long ago in the Obsidian Club. Marcus had changed too. He was slowly stepping away from the underground work, moving toward a legitimate life. He invested in real estate, restaurants, and charitable projects. Jimmy stayed at his side, but now as the head of security for the Salvatore family's lawful corporation. Victor still kept watch in his quiet way, but now he had more time to play with Grace in the garden, something no one would have believed the cold-faced man would ever enjoy. Marcus told Cassie he wanted to build a future Grace could be proud of, a future where they did not have to fear or hide. One autumn evening, the whole family sat together around the dinner table. Mrs. Webb had made Grace's favorite spaghetti, and Grace was excitedly talking about her class trip to the zoo. Then, all at once, she stopped. She looked at her parents with shining blue eyes. "Daddy, Mama Cassie, can I ask for something?" "What is it, princess?" Marcus asked, smiling. "I want a baby," Grace said, her voice full of hope. "My friend Lily in my class has a tiny little brother, and he is so cute. I want a little brother or sister to play with, so I can teach the baby how to draw, and read stories to the baby." I promise I will be the best big sister in the world." Marcus and Cassie looked at each other, a look filled with meaning. Then Cassie smiled and placed her hand on her belly. "You know, Grace, maybe your wish is about to come true." Grace's eyes went wide as she followed Cassie's hand. Then she understood, and her small face lit up like the sun. "Mama, Cassie has a baby in her tummy." "Really? Really?" She hopped down from her chair and ran to hug Cassie tight. "I am going to be a big sister. I am going to have a baby. Daddy, Mama has a baby." Marcus stood up and wrapped his arms around the two most important women in his life. He kissed Cassie's forehead, his eyes bright with a happiness he thought he would never feel again. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for giving me everything." Cassie lifted her gaze to him, happy tears sliding down her cheeks. "No, thank you. Thank you and Grace for giving me a family." Outside the window, yellow leaves drifted softly in the autumn wind. Inside the warm dining room, a family held one another, laughing, dreaming of what was coming next. It had all begun on one dark night in a club, when a little girl who had been silent for 4 years suddenly called a stranger Mama. Miracles were real. Love could heal every wound, and family was not always the people who shared our blood, but sometimes the people our hearts chose to love. Cassie, Marcus, and Grace's story had come to a close, but their journey continued. A family built from pain, bound together by love, blessed by a miracle. That was the true meaning of the word family. This story brings us a profound lesson about the power of love and resilience. No matter how far life pushes us down, there is always light at the end of the tunnel. Sometimes the best things come to us when we are no longer expecting them. Family is not only blood, but also the people willing to love and sacrifice for one another. And most importantly, miracles can happen to anyone, as long as we open our hearts to receive them. How do you feel about this story? Does it remind you of anything in your real life? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. We truly want to hear what is in your heart. If this story touched your emotions, please subscribe to the channel, press like, and share this video with your loved ones, so you can listen to more moving stories every day. Wishing everyone watching this video strong health, a joyful life, and peace every day.